Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, I talk racism, whiteness, and evolving with Fanshen Cox DiGiovanni. Check it out.
Yeah! Oh my god, I'm such a nerd.
Nailed it. Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of grace. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I'm not alone. I have an amazing guest. She goes by the name of Fanshen Cox DiGiovanni. Yes, indeed?
Yes, indeed.
High five, Worthy?
I got it.
So you mind if I introduce the folks out there to you by reading your awesome bio?
I don't mind at all. Okay. Please.
And I got to already say that I edited this down, but when you get a chance, we're going to give all the links at the end. You need to read Fanshen's full bio.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Fanshen Cox DiGiovanni is head of strategic outreach at Pearl Street Films. In this role, she advises Pearl Street's owners, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, on taking specific steps towards inclusive representation in the entertainment industry. One of her first initiatives on the job was to co-author the Inclusion Rider, referred to by Frances McDormand in her 2018 Oscar acceptance speech. Did I do that one correctly?
Yeah, it was perfect.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome. Fanshen was recently named one of 12 Hollywood Disruptors by The Wrap. Fanshen is an award-winning playwright, actor, producer, and educator, and she frequently performs her one-woman show, One Drop of Love, across the country. The show is produced by Cox DiGiovanni, Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon. She served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Cape Verde, West Africa, and has designed curricula for and taught English as a second language to students from all over the world.
Nice.
High five. So a bio, is even as awesome as yours, can only capture like a little bit of a person.
Right. It's just words on a page, right? Yeah, not the soul.
Yeah. So what can it capture? What can you tell us?
Oh my goodness! You mean more about my bio or what's in there or
anything you'd like?
Oh gosh, I since I was little, I've been dedicated to storytelling. Certainly, I wanted to find ways to tell stories myself, especially through acting was kind of my first passion. But I also kind of, especially as I got the opportunity and gave myself the opportunity to tell stories, now my focus is on kind of helping other people tell theirs. So all of the things in my bio, I hope, lead down that path. Mm-hmm.
I met you through One Drop of Love.
Yes.
At the Museum of Tolerance.
Yes.
What was, just a little tidbit or a little snippet, what was the origin story? How did that play, that one-woman show, come about?
Like I said, I've known, since I was little that I wanted to be an actor. I started to also learn how to write and produce as I got older, and especially because I was kind of frustrated with how Hollywood saw me, or I should say didn't see me, and therefore there's always kind of this, going out for roles, but feeling like I didn't fit in anyone's categories. So once I learned how to write, I enrolled in an MFA program, and One Drop was my thesis for my MFA, and it really changed my life, both just as an actor, giving myself the best role of a lifetime, right? To give myself the agency to talk about people that I've known in my life or create characters. But also, yes, that it's connected to something I'm passionate about, which is kind of confronting the construction of race in the United States and the ways that has led to racism, and therefore so few people, or some people have not having access to resources that they should have. So anyway, that's I did it for my thesis for my MFA, and shortly afterwards the museum started bringing me to do workshops, and that's how we met.
Yes, indeed. I've really heard the origin story as related to how I know Tom Earl, but that was a nice little wrap up.
Yes.
So, two things. One, true or false, after Obama was elected, we therefore then lived in a post-racial America.
Oh, see, you're laughing because you know the answer already. Yeah, absolutely 100% false, clearly. It was false. Many of us knew at that time that it was false. Although I will say that I have evolved, right? Like doing my show and doing research for the show and also kind of witnessing events since we have lost Obama as our president. Really, I thought that I knew how bad things were, and then I keep discovering. And that's not just things that have happened since then. It's also really kind of delving into our historical past and understanding things that nobody told us. And I went to progressive schools, and still there are things that nobody told us. And I think it was because they were so ugly about our history. So yeah, no, we are not post-racial.
It's a hard joke to make in Trump land.
Yeah. God, is this Trump land? I thought we were in a safe space here, Tom.
This room is not Trump land.
Okay. Good.
The other one is this. So majority of people will listen to this as a podcast.
Okay.
And so they might be trying to use context clues, but you said stories like mine or including people like me. Would you mind?
Sure. So yes, one of the things, again, because I focus so much on the construction of race in the United States, my father is Jamaican. He immigrated to the U.S. in the 50s. And he kind of right away was confronted with, and also I think encouraged to identify as Black, no longer as Jamaican, but as Black, right, or African American. My mother is white, grew up in rural Oregon, a very, very small town, very much in poverty, and her family is also Cherokee and Blackfoot Indian. And so yes, both of them were kind of born into the structures of race and racism, and then had children that now were carrying both of these different, what we consider now to be different sides of race and racism, but ultimately we know we're all kind of been inflicted with the ideology of white supremacy, which leads to all of our kind of pain and angst and lack of resources. So that's what I mean. I'm kind of, I think other people would look at me and call me mixed race. This is terminology I don't use it for myself, especially I don't use terminology that includes the word race. So I don't say things like mixed race or biracial. Because I think they just perpetuate this ideology of this hierarchy of quote unquote races. But yes, culturally, from what this society thinks of, I'm mixed.
And so that story you're telling about your parents, the kids they had, that's you, right?
The kids they had, that's what I mean. They had me, they had my brother, so they had, yes, that's right. And they both kind of purposely went about, they knew that this was going to be something unique. At least, that was in the late 60s that they had my brother and me, and they knew that they were doing something. Well, first of all, it was still illegal for them to get married in some states when they got married.
What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
They got married in 60, I think it was, I want to say 64, 65. So, of course, the loving decision wasn't until 1967. It was at that point over only in 16 states. So they were in California. They were able to get married, but they knew that it was still illegal in other places. So yeah, they were kind of doing a little bit of a social experiment, including the name that they gave me. So my name Fanshen is Chinese, and it comes from a book about a small village in China called Longbo Village, that took on this word Fanshen, which means to turn the body over or to turn over. They took it on as their motto to start a revolution. So I think my parents were very clearly kind of instilling these very challenging ideals into me and my brother.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it's exhausting.
I can imagine. So, one thing that I think folks, for many different reasons, strive to is terminology. Sometimes to box people in, sometimes to be respectful. Many different reasons they come to that table. And so you started to kind of highlight how you don't like any terminology with the word race in it.
Yeah.
So what for folks who are like, well, now what do I do?
Exactly, right. Well, what you do is you study and you read books, right? I think it's not so much for me to tell you how you should identify yourself. I think it's more, there's all this history that, like I was saying, that even those of us who may have grown up in kind of progressive areas, there's still all this really ugly, painful history that was not taught us. For example, whiteness and how and when whiteness was created in the first place, which, before the 1600s, there just was no such thing. And suddenly it was made up out of thin air, this concept of white. And it was made for, purely evil, nefarious reasons to permanently disenfranchise anybody who wasn't white. And so when we say race at all, we are kind of perpetuating this idea that it's real. And it does have ramifications that are real. It tells us about people's ability to accumulate wealth, for example, in this country. But I think when we, especially mixed race and biracial, that type of terminology, I think, cannot be separated from the ideology of white supremacy that created the concept of race. And so for mixed people or people with parents from different backgrounds, I think it's really important to always be aware of that. I can't tell you what to call yourself. At the end of the show, I say, I am a culturally mixed woman who's proud to be Black, and I am searching for racial answers. And that's what I encourage everyone to do. Keep uncovering the truth of what it means yourself.
One thing that was brought up in the question I was presenting is this striving to simplify complex conversations.
Good point, yeah.
How can we as a group, as a community, as people in this work, move past this like binary or it's this or that or embrace the nuance?
Yeah, it's tough because I wrote a post the other day about the problematic nature of the phrase women and people of color. Because what we really mean when we say women in that case is white women. Because people of color, there are women in the category of people of color. So when we say that, we're saying women and women of color and men of color. There's no reason to repeat the word woman, right? And and the term people of color is problematic because it means that white is not a color. So white is human and we're all something different. So again, and yet we need sometimes a shorthand to get to a different point, right? My point in that post was, let's say what we mean when we say that. In entertainment, for example, when we talk about disparities of directors, a lack of directors, we should say we're lacking white women directors and we're lacking women of color directors and we're lacking men of color directors versus women and people of color. And still acknowledging that there's a problem with the term people of color. So I don't know, how do you feel about it?
Which part?
I guess about whether we should try to kind of simplify things, like with terminology, for example. Sometimes are there cases where we feel like it's necessary or important to simplify it by saying people of color, for example, or should we every single time make sure we're kind of delving into the depth of what it means or complexity?
I don't know if I'm the white guy gets to be the final say on that one.
Oh, you don't. I'm not saying you're gonna be the final say, but I'm just curious.
Well, I think with my facilitator hat on, that one thing I see when we bring new groups in is like, hey, you learned this terminology with another facilitator. Well,
now we're going to start using this.
Where it's like some people, like I did not go to progressive school. I went to a school where, like, I am sure during the Trump, people were wearing Trump hats.
Wow.
People were saying like the N-word. Like at my school, like I don't know if you've heard of Mark Chmura. This person, a football player, was in a hot tub with all these high school girls.
Okay.
And like these high school girls, it's their fault, you know. So like,
oh boy,
Me Too, even before the internet was around with these celebrities. So that was my high school. In in my town, when you drive by, you'll see like Hillary should go to jail. Obama should hang. Like you see that on people's lawns.
Wow. I'm sorry. I mean, so for you didn't have that exposure.
So if I'm coming to a conversation with them, I'm trying for like minimum level of respect and humanity.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, hey, you shouldn't call people colored people.
Right.
Like, switch people of color. Like, so then for me to say, and even that though is problematic.
Well, I wonder, Tom, because I think a lot about whose kind of whose responsibility is it to face those people, right? Like, it certainly shouldn't be the most marginalized of us, because some of us are just trying to live every day, right? And so maybe that is your job, to actually insist on specificity and to, and while also saying, both that we need to be specific here about these things right now, but there's some complexity there. Like maybe that's what you got to do versus me, or versus, again, we go down the line in terms of who should take that on. I mean, takes us to also, how do you approach these conversations in an effective way? And I think we have to think about what's effective, right? Like sometimes for me, what's effective, the only thing that's important to me about what's effective is that I'm angry and I need to get my anger out. Because if it stays inside, and that might mean that I call out a group of people on Facebook, or that I call out somebody in a Q&A after one drop. Having said that, usually that person doesn't change. And so I have to know that in that case, I chose myself, and that's fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that person or that situation would change. Other times I have the energy. Other times I feel safe, and that's really important. Like I feel physically safe or spiritually safe to have a different conversation with that person. And then sometimes I see that things change. But I also see sometimes things change when I get angry too.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's tough. It's tough.
What have been some of the conversations you've had along the One Drop of Love journey?
Oh man, so many. I mean, I think kind of the most powerful conversations I have are when people are compelled to share their own story with me after watching it. And it always is so beautiful to me that objectively, if someone else were hearing them say, oh my God, my story's like yours, and they start telling it, someone objectively might be like, that's nothing like what the story she just told, right?
Yeah.
And I get it that, wow, this particular piece of the show and of my life spoke to you. And that's good storytelling, is that you find ways that even though you're telling your own personal experience, but you also know that there are pieces of that connect all of us, just like the construction of race. None of us are devoid of that. Like it affects all of us. And so you find those moments. So I'm never surprised, but I'm also always deeply moved by people who share their own story with me after the show.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Have you seen the early 90s film where it's four guys and they're at a retreat together? I think it's called The Color of Fear or something.
Oh, a documentary?
Yeah.
Yes. And they're going at each other and being real, kind of vulnerable and some angry. Yes.
There's one line that one of the black gentleman says to one of the white guys, who initially says, I don't have a racist bone in my body. So he's saying to him, whiteness doesn't have a culture. You don't have a lineage. You don't have tradition. Doesn't that bother you? And so when I hear you say that, racism affects all of us. I mean, that's a much gentler impact, obviously.
Yeah.
Than, go ahead.
It could be. It's so funny because I think what we're saying now is that whiteness actually very much does. I think that again, evolving is so important, right? I think, and that was part of what I was talking about. We didn't talk, even though I went to progressive schools, and the city that I went to pats itself on the back constantly on its, we're wokeness. We never talked about whiteness. And the thing is that in not doing so, we just always thought of white as human and then everything else as other, when in reality it is a very specific identity. And it's just as painful and torturous for white people to be stuck in that identity. Well, not just as, because you still get resources, right? But it's for the soul, it's, I would argue, even potentially worse to have a white identity, because you are kind of stuck in this culture that has a lot of reconciling to do, right? Because no matter how woke you are, or righteous and well-meaning, you benefit. And when I say you, me too, looking the way I look, we benefit from this horrendous thing all day, every day. Have you seen Us yet?
Ooh, you already saw it opening weekend?
Unfortunately, you see these bags under my eyes? I didn't sleep last night.
Wow.
But it really makes some some deep, deep points about what it means to live your life every day and not think about, because you're not even exposed to those who don't have what you have. And that's whiteness, and that's light-skinnedness, and that's male, cisgender maleness, like all of these things that there's only so much you can't even be aware of. And so, yeah, I hope that we've evolved past thinking of white as not being something and thinking of it as actually being something that is not every man, but an identity, a really with horrible origins.
So it's not cultureless, it has a culture, and it's one that's like a violent history kind of a thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Exactly. It's extremely cultureful, and it's just, unfortunately, it comes with, really, like, what I say, once we've kind of warmed up the audience in the Q&A, I've had white mixed people ask me, well, Fanshen, I'm proud of being black, so why can't I be proud of being white? And I say, no, you can't. You could be proud of being Scottish or Danish or any of the, and even that you might want to look into and see, but like any of those origins before you were called white, there are probably some good things to be proud of. But there's nothing to be proud of in a white identity. It is rooted only in the ideology of white supremacy.
And what you're talking about, where it was created specifically around 1600 to justify, etc.
Entirely. That's literally the only reason it exists. And then people say, well, that was 1600. That's not. And I'm like, no, because then there were there's Jim Crow. Then there's the federal housing laws. Like it can, and there's today, like police brutality, right? Or police violence. It continues to be part of your identity that is this ugly past, but it kind of benefits, quote unquote, right? Not spiritually for certain, but benefits you in terms of resources. It's tough.
It's such an awesome conversation.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I started listening to, this is such a unique experience. I started listening to this podcast, and this is a white guy, and I actually resonate with the podcast. But one aspect of it is this this layer that the government and like America and like God bless America and like, you know, like we're good and we go around the world and make the world a better place. Like there's this subtle layer of that. And I haven't been involved in like listening to something I resonate that has any of that. So it's like this, like, I feel this like calling to conform to like, come back home, Tom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where you're saying, because it's like you were saying, it's discomfort when us white
power
folks
of it. That's the
really investigate what it means.
I was just thinking about this today, Tom, because there was NPR did a piece, I think it was on my drive here, this with Terry Gross today on white nationalism, which, by the way, even that terminology is problematic because we still can't get the words out of our mouth, ideology of white supremacy. And anytime we feel uncomfortable with it, that's probably the one we should be using. I think a lot of these things we're like, oh, he's a white nationalist versus this ideology of whiteness being supreme. And therefore, you and I sitting here doing this and people, you know, downloading this podcast because of what we look like, right? All the things in my bio, I'm aware that those things, that my white adjacency or whiteness feed into those, right? And so now there's a lot of discourse on like, well, you're the reason there's, you know, it's because you keep talking about it. You keep saying it, that there's this, you know, groundswell of totally ignoring the fact that the person in the White House right now is encouraging it, right? And so it's not that we're talking about it, right? It's that there's somebody that's encouraging it and saying, don't worry, you're safe to do and say the things you say. And so, yeah, I think, of course, it's attractive that if you feel like you're being called out, it's attractive to kind of lean into that place where you feel like, I am good.
Yeah.
As opposed to none of us are. Like, if I may, I'll give you an example of something I did recently, a couple of years ago, actually, and it sits with me, and it's, how do I make up for this? What do I do? So I was planning to do a workshop for the Skirball Center, and they hired some teaching artists, and so I was one of the artists, and another woman who's a Black Muslim woman was another teaching artist, and so we had a conference call on making plans what we're going to do. And I said to this woman, oh, where's your family from? And she said, Oakland. And here I am, like, you white supremacy, you know, whiteness, and I just presumed that because this was a Black family, a Black Muslim family, that they couldn't possibly be from the United States. And I could run from my embarrassment and fear of that, or I could be like, yo, I gotta do better. I'm not going to flog myself and like, right? Like, I'm just going to be like, I messed that up. I got to do better. Right. How I'm doing that is like, so she then went on to make a film that's did very, very well last year called Jinn, about a Black Muslim family and centering a Black Muslim young girl. And, obviously supporting the film and seeing the film and being like, oh, get it in my head. There are Black Muslim, like Black American Muslims. And just kind of being more aware of that is the most I can do. And if I get canceled or called out for that, I'm not going to get fragile about it. I'm going to be like, yeah, I deserve to be canceled over that. I'm going to go over here and keep doing what I can do, but I'm not going to, I deserve your anger. I deserve your offense to me doing that. It's on me.
I know within the Muslim community too, Black Muslims always get asked if they're, like, people can assume they're American and they get asked if they're converts.
Right, that's the next thing, right? Oh, you must, right. And I know you know a lot about this, right? Yeah, right. And it's I like Robin DiAngelo's work on white fragility, and one of her main points, because she goes through like really, hard to read stuff about what it feels like, and then what your behavior is leading from you, the feelings, and how you shut down any progress to dismantling, these ideologies. And then people always say, like, well, okay, what am I supposed to do? And one of her suggestions is stamina. So when you're a person of color, you practice stamina all day, every day, just to get through the day. You're constantly reminded you shouldn't be doing, or a woman, right? You shouldn't be doing this. You can't be doing this. No, you can't. And so the only way you could survive is to just have this stamina. So white folks, people feeling that fragility, need to practice stamina.
That's powerful.
It is powerful.
Yeah, I always think of it as that this discomfort you feel that you want to shy away from, Tom. Like, that's what it means to be aware of.
Yeah, lean into it, right? That's a good. You're feeling it. And I don't. I'm not saying like, I'm all about self-care too, because I do think there are going to have to be moments where you're like, I actually got to step away, because. I certainly always recommend, like, I think there should be whiteness. I'm careful when I say this. I'm going to say whiteness affinity groups. I don't mean white nationalist
like
affinity groups. But I do mean, for example, I work with the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference. And this is this place where those of us who come from this background, right, can get together and both lament how sucky it is for people to tell us we're not black enough, right? Or we're not white enough, or whatever it is, right? Or talk about it, talk about us, or talk about our family and not recognize us or not embrace us, right? And yet, so that's that place to do that in the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference. I'm not going to go to a Black Lives Matter meeting and say how hard it is for me that you don't accept me as black. It's not the place, right? That's not the focus of the work. I'm going to go with my folks and get that out and think about the ways that we're being fragile in that, and we can have some stamina around it, but to talk about it together is really helpful, so that I can go to the Black Lives Matter meeting and have the stamina and let go of my feelings and do the work that needs to be done there.
I mean, I agree. Whenever I do racial workshops and stuff, there's not very many white facilitators, so I'm often called to be the white caucus facilitator.
Right.
And I do notice, because sometimes, especially, I've noticed a trend where younger white folks who have seen the internet lingo, sometimes I think perform activism and I'm trying to not to use the word race. Good,
yeah.
Now I'm aware of my language.
It's all right. Sometimes I say roots, like mixed roots, but, cultural, ethnicity, whatever. Yeah. Right.
And then when you get, like, alone, it's like, okay, let's really talk about this. Well, especially after, like, a privilege line activity, how come we were all near the front? My life was hard too. That whole thing. Right. And then the black and brown people don't have to, because sometimes those workshops can become all about helping the white people realize they do have privilege.
And that's exhausting.
So I think when you caucus,
get together, get your groups together and do it that way. I know there's like the white privilege conference, but even those, I see there are a lot of black and brown folks going to those conferences. I always think like, okay, but they must be exhausted, right? Like, where is that, where are those places where white folks get, and there are some good ones. Like, do you know the White Nonsense Roundup?
I know it online.
Yeah, online. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's just, it's good. Right. Yeah. It's great, right? I think there are, and so whatever it is they talk about together is nice. Yeah.
Let's talk about, you had talked about two moments that I'm curious about. One, that moment where you realize you messed up. And then two, do you feel, well, let's start there. I don't want to layer on questions.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the hardest areas for people when you're like, oh, oops, I did or have done or perpetuated some form of ism on a personal or systemic level. And it's a value you care about and a person you care about.
Yeah.
How can we, with grace, move through that without trying to get the person to make you feel better, and without it turning into shame, where it's like, I made a mistake versus I have a mistake.
Oh, well, you just said it all. You answered the question. Yeah, I think like not being embarrassed of being embarrassed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess the shame thing, right? Like I don't think there's a place for shame, because I think shame is really dangerous. I think shame is the thing that might be leading you to feel comfort in that podcast, right? Because it's like shame leads you to just be like, oh, it's the worst feeling. I just want to run away from it. So like really kind of loving yourself and being like, it's okay that I just made that mistake. I mean, it's okay for me. Like I'm not a bad person. I'm right. Like those things. And yet it still is a mistake.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of people either go to like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person, or that wasn't so bad, right? Or, what do you know? Just like, right? Like, oh, let me explain why it wasn't, this kind of thing. Versus, no, you've got to have a deep sense of humility that there are things you don't know. There are experiences you don't have. And so I think like the we light-skinned white folks get pink. So we can't even hide our embarrassment, right? Like we're both doing it right now, right? Like, and so it's there, and then it's like, what do you do with that? And the worst thing I think is to try to hide it. It's there. It's it's a true moment. It's an authentic moment, and but I think like what you said, it's not about you as a person. You have the right to be able to evolve in this life, and you should. And that ultimately is the best thing for all of us, is a openness and willingness to evolve. So, yeah.
Yeah, my degree was Africology. And I loved it because every class, someone was paid, so they weren't forced to be there, to like give me these, not just me, my classmates, these moments of like, before this moment, you were an asshole in this way. Here's how you can not be as big of an asshole. And I'd rather have the choice.
Yeah.
Than just blindly hurt people.
Sure. And also sometimes you just will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's like not okay, but it's also like there's only so much you can know. That's that humility piece, is like, you can't know all of it, and that's okay. And that's where I'm like, when it comes to race and racism, no matter how somebody calls you out, your reaction is everything, right? They don't owe you any other explanation for it. And when I say they, I mean a person who's marginalized based on race. Or ethnicity or culture, right? They don't owe you any way of saying it better to you or more efficient, or a way that they don't owe you any of that. Everything is about your reaction to it. So you have the tools. Well, you may not have the tools, but the first tool is, it's all on you in terms of how you react. Yeah.
So there's a lot of conversations around call out and canceling. First question, do you think that there's a difference between being called out and being canceled?
Yes. I think, call out leaves you an opportunity to, I think like you can call someone out, and if they respond in a way that is humble and with stamina and, and kind of acknowledge, then they don't get canceled. I think when you're canceled, I talked to someone about this recently, he was being sarcastic, and he wrote, "I'm not saying Trump's a racist." Is this okay? Yeah, right. What? Okay, I'm assuming the people. Right, okay, I'm like, I don't know who's listening to this. Whatever. Right, it's a good point. Okay,
welcome. This is what we do.
So he says, "I'm not saying Trump's a racist. I'm just saying the people who voted for him are." And I was like, well, why aren't you saying Trump's a racist?
So Trump's not racist, but the people who voted for him are racist.
Right.
Okay, I got you.
This is what his point was,
Okay.
Right. Even your smile said, right? And so I'm like, well, why aren't you just saying that he's a racist? Like, it is a white guy. And I'm like, that would actually be helpful to me to know that you are saying that he is racist. Well, and he starts dancing around the response, dancing around it. And his first thing is, well, Andrew Gillum, he kind of tries to quote a black man, like why and I'm like, you're not Andrew Gillum, right? Like, you're not in his position. Well, yes, but this and that. And then finally he tells me that I didn't get the joke, that he was being sarcastic. And of course Trump is a racist, but I didn't get the joke, right? What an opportunity for him to be like, a person of color just told me that I said something that offended, right? Or that was not the truth that people of color need to hear from me right now. Yeah. And I could just cut out all of these other posts and comments and just say, yeah, you're right. Trump's a racist. Like, what an opportunity. And so he's a friend and he's someone that I grew up with. And so I'm not canceling him. I've canceled family members because of the pain of it, for protection. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not down on people who cancel, because I know that you have gotten pushed to a point or a limit where you are doing self-care. And yet I hope that we all see evolving as the only way for us to actually get anywhere. And so that means evolving ourselves and allowing other people to evolve. But I'm not judging anybody else who shuts that down sometimes.
I think I have a unique experience having lived my life with every privilege you can imagine for 24 years and then converting to Islam. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still am a white Muslim, so I get the benefit of everybody wants to know what the white Muslim thinks, and I don't get any Islamophobia unless you know I'm Muslim.
Right.
But one thing I have come to realize, that because most of my pain comes as the pain of an ally. So I'm like, I feel like I have empathy. As close as I get, and it sucks it's happening to you. I'm with you. I'm pissed. But then, like, when New Zealand happens, it reminds me that it's not the same pain until it happens to, like, your community. And I think it's an experiential realization, because I work with an organization where we do Muslim-Jewish solidarity. And so when Tree of Life happened, I was there for my, Jewish friends. But I didn't hurt as much as when New Zealand happened.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important for all of us as white folks or ally in any sphere to remember that it doesn't hurt the same when it's not you.
But your example is a really interesting one, because you weren't a Muslim. So when before you converted, it wouldn't have been as painful to you.
I would have been hurt, but
right. I guess the point of that is that one can learn to be empathetic, because it's not that you were not born that way, right? You made a choice, and then in that choice you became empathetic towards it. So therefore all of us could learn. And I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but in becoming Muslim, what that means is that you are deep in study, right? You are deep in understanding the history and the culture, everything that goes along with it. And that's what I'm saying is, white folks need to deeply study whiteness.
Agreed.
So that you do, and I am confident that when you do that, you're not going to become a white supremacist. You're going to have empathy. The empathy that you're describing you're having, it will help you have empathy towards people who are not white.
But it will never hurt as much when something happens to somebody that's black. You will never feel it as much as they feel it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, so then
no matter how much empathy you have.
Well, so then do you feel that the empathy you had for New Zealand is less than, for example, a brown Muslim?
No, it's more like what I'm saying is that somebody targeted people because they were Muslim.
Right. But they were brown Muslim.
But
does that matter?
If I was in that masjid and I was praying, like, they would have shot me.
Were there white people there?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, I do know that I potentially could be like, I'm just here cleaning, man. Like, I get that I could have passed.
Right.
But it's still this feeling of like, why do they hate us?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do they, like, wow, these people hate Muslims. And if they knew I was Muslim, I would still get privilege, but they would be coming after me.
Right.
And that's just not something you can feel when it's not your demographic that's targeted.
But I still, okay, but I'm saying it was not your, when did you become Muslim?
Like 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 7 years ago, it was not your demographic.
And so I felt empathy for Islamophobia. Mm-hmm. And I would do, that's how I learned about Islam, because I was doing a bunch of Islamophobia.
Right.
Like
you learned things. You learned.
Yeah. But I don't feel that same fear of the attack or that same, like, this could happen to me or these are my people. It's just, I don't think I'm doing it justice describing. But
I mean, I think you are. I think what you're saying is because it's not like the reason that you now have this deeper sense of empathy, like you said, it's now your demographic, it's now us, right? Mm-hmm. But that wasn't like an overnight thing. Mm-hmm. That came through you studying and having your mind open to to learning about this and understanding it. That's what did it. Because I think if we say it just has to be your demographic, I think we're a little bit doomed. I think what we have to say is you could learn to have empathy, which is what you did 7 years ago.
You can, I guess what I'm trying to say is...
or to even feel connected to it.
Like, you can learn to have empathy, and when, like, a black person is shot by the police, like, I am enraged and I have empathy, but I will never know what that rage or pain or fear feels like a black person feels.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying. Yes,
no matter how mad or afraid or anything, like, I'll never be able to feel it with the same intensity that it feels to actually be that demographic.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. I hear you. And I'll just say, what I think you could do so that your level of anger about it or disappointment or sadness or all of those things pushes you to action is to learn more.
Agreed.
So we're on the same. Okay.
But I think
right.
I don't know why I'm so like I need to make this. I just think it's important for white folks, or especially people who have lots of privilege, though, to remember that there's just no amount of learning that'll ever drive home. You could read for 24/7, experiential learning.
Right.
You'll just never know how much it hurts.
Yes.
And I think that's why we just have to, like, trust and take the lead of people who actually are experiencing. Because and when it's like, if you have any doubt that maybe it's not that bad, it's like, you think it's not that bad because you'll just never know. Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Tom. And I say that, so I totally agree. You'll never know. Never ever. But I am concerned about, like, perfect example. Like I said, I grew up in this very progressive city. Yeah. Everybody always, we're so good. We love everybody, you know. And it has come to my attention as I've gotten older, and especially kind of from posts, right, and social media, that they don't know a goddamn thing about whiteness, for example. Yeah. Like we don't know anything about performativity of gender, for example. Like so few of us do, right? Understanding those things. And I find that only the ones who do some reading, you know, and really kind of delve into it are the ones that on a level of are able to have that humility and the stamina immediately. Versus the ones who say, yeah, we get it. Like, oh my God, that video, did you see the guy being shot? That's horrible. Trump's a racist, you know, saying all these things, but not having that context, like the historical context, right? Or not having that. those are the ones that constantly, well, I was joking and you didn't get it. And then when you respond, you know me well enough to know that I'm not racist. So I fear that I don't want people to hear that by saying, like, you can't ever read enough books to ever feel it. I agree. But you can certainly, and you owe it to yourself and to us, if you're going to be in this movement, you can certainly learn if you go to my website for educators list, there are books there. I mean, there's so much there, right? It's available to you. You can certainly, and you should learn,
I think you brought up the important part. I have to then say, and therefore. So therefore to myself is that, like, that's why I'm able to be a little bit more comfortable. That's why I'm able to, like, insert the excuse of self-care maybe a little more than it actually is.
I see.
Because it just doesn't hurt as much. I don't feel the same, like, disorientation and, like, I don't even feel like working because I'm just, like, so overwhelmed. Right. So it's, like, it needs to push me further. Like, because it's not always going to be an emotional motivation to be an ally.
Sure.
That's what, like, I realized for me, that I can't always rely upon empathy, even though I am very empathetic, but it's not always going to be so strong that it gets me on the front lines.
Absolutely.
And so my values, therefore, have to get me on the front lines.
Yes. Yep. I'm with you.
I appreciate the heck out of you helping me think through this.
No, that was great for me too. Yeah, I hear that. That's,
And I think it's more than just studying Islam. Like, I've been actively experienced Islamophobia, even my white guy. Like, family members been like, you're not a part of my family. Or workplaces being like, yes, you were discriminated against because you're Muslim, but you made other people afraid because of your Muslimness.
Right.
And I've been like, wow, HR discrimination things aren't real. Like, people are right. Where they're like, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. No, it's not. HR won't care. Like, experiencing that from my own identity, I think that's, you can't experience it as a white person. You know what I'm saying? You can only read about it.
Yeah.
And feel for the person that I went, but you'll never get to experience it. And that's when I think a lot of people's biggest ahas happen.
When they experience it.
Yeah,
something that's right. But
and it's impossible.
If you're white, you never will, right?
And that's
when it comes to racism, right? You never will.
Gotta be higher.
Yeah, right. So what would you say that thing is that's higher?
I think that's my values. The
values.
The value has to drive because there's going to be a lot of things you're just not going to get. I guess you got to go on faith.
Right.
And like really believing. I think that's so important to believe. People of color, women,
always,
etc.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I just did it. People of color, women.
Exactly.
People of color who are women and women who are
white women. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. We do it.
What are some other things that you want to talk about before we?
Well, I think there are so many different ways that we can go about this. And I think, your facilitation and your just the way you're living is really, I think a great example of a model of how do we do this? Like, how do we make change? And I think like all of us have to kind of start with the things that we're good at or passionate about or whatever that means. So this also, right, deciding to do this in this format. I'm a storyteller and I really, I have seen it have an impact, and there's data around the impactfulness of storytelling. And so I guess I would just say that my next phase, now that the show is kind of coming, I'm done traveling with it this year. My next phase is really focusing on like how to help other people tell theirs. And so I think that's all is just, this is where I'm going now is, encouraging other people and sharing with other people what I learned, what I could have done better. And that's it. Tell stories.
Well, I know this could be a whole other podcast, so if we could just get a little snippet for folks who are inspired, they feel called to tell their story, or maybe they have an awesome story, but they're too scared to tell it, etc.
Yeah. Yes.
What's your advice for stories?
So there's always a way to tell it. If you're afraid to stand up in front of a group of people, that doesn't have to be the way you tell your story. You could paint, right? You could write a song. You could dance. You can, there's so many different ways. But do get your story out there. Find some way to tell it. If it's just stuck inside of you, we miss so much. So first of all, I'd say you don't have to just stand up in front of people and do it. There are many other ways. But I would say share it. Mm-hmm. I mean, my point is that it's in the sharing of it that helps us change. And so I do think you have to find a way that you're comfortable sharing it. Number two, I think when we want to have an impact, when we want our story to have an impact, I think that it is not always impactful when we only focus on our own personal experience and we don't see how that experience is connected to others. And so the device that I use for that in the show is the historical context. So I use the Us Census Racial Categories from the first one in 1790 through to the most recent one, to show the audience that we are all, this is not just me and my family. Every single one of us is counted on this census, and therefore everyone in this room all the time is connected in this way. And so I always strongly push storytellers to think beyond their own story. Start with your story because it's important, but also then go beyond that. And how does that connect to other people? Why should I hear your story in ways that I'm connected to also? So I think those two things, find a way to tell it and then find the connection to others, is a great starting point.
And what about for folks who are afraid of rejection, ridicule, being canceled, all these things, being the butt of a viral joke? What is your advice to those
Stamina. It's and I don't mean to say that in I don't love this. There's this what is it like? There's just some author who Grit or something like this, right? Like, not all of us can have that. And if you've been rejected or torn down your whole life, and now you want to put this new thing out there and you're afraid of it, I get it. But without the stamina of putting it out there, you'll never know, and we'll never know. And then forgive yourself and allow yourself to evolve. And that it is okay that you said it wrong or you hurt people. It's not okay that you hurt them, but it's okay that you are in a learning process and can get better. If you choose not to get better, then you're going to get canceled. But the call out piece, and I'm not saying it's easy, I've not easy by any means, but if you can get past that, all the pride and the ego that's, pumping at your chest, you can get past that with stamina and with humility. The other side is always, you're like, oh, okay, breathe again. The world is wide. Lots of people who do want to hear you and are glad that you evolved in that way and now can share in this way.
Yes. It's awesome advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Do you mind if I add onto that?
Please.
Unless it's a fluke and you go viral, or you are like Beyonce good right now, most people's talent evolves with their audience. So if you were to share tomorrow, I would guess you probably don't have that big of an audience. And so if people do get upset, it might only be like 10 people.
Good point. So, yes, that's my point around the world is wide, right? Like I have a quick story. Ben, as you know, I work with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Ben put me in a film called Gone Baby Gone, his directorial debut. Gave me a role, but it was definitely my friend Fanshen wants to be an actor. I'm going to give her a part. So I'm full on aware of my privilege in that, right? Yeah. But he doesn't really give me a real role. There's nothing in the script. It's kind of, so I get, I'm flying to the set and I'm on set and I'm kind of what am I saying? What am I doing? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, we're going to, the cameras are coming. They're like, action. And I freeze. My scene is with Morgan Freeman.
Oh my God.
Okay. And he's like, just ad lib, and I freeze. Right. And so it's horrible. If you ever listen to the DVD commentary, he and the screenwriter are like, oh, that's our friend Fanshen. Like, you'll see me for 2 seconds. Right. So for 2 to 3 years, I'm like, oh my God, I am horrible. I'm a horrible actor. I'm stupid. Just beating myself up. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's a film that the demographic the kind of films that I watch, I probably wouldn't have even gone to see this movie. And, just all these things that help me be, and then I wrote my show and I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole, I've got all these stories. That's not my story. It's a good part of my story, actually, because I evolved, right? Yeah. But it's not my story. My story is all of this. So, you are so much bigger than those moments in your life. You're so much bigger than that. And those moments are part of an integral part of your story and evolving. And it's okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story.
Thank you.
So you might have heard me say at the beginning that this is my year of grace. Yes. So when you were asking why I started this, I had my year of expression. And then after that was my year of balance, year of courage, now my year of grace. Awesome. And so I like to explore with my guests what those words mean to them. So if you don't mind, what does grace mean to you?
I think it means just kind of coming off of what we were just talking about, forgiving myself, and therefore others, that even those I call out or even cancel. The more I forgive myself, the more I can forgive others. I think that's what grace looks like.
It's awesome. I appreciate that. So if you don't mind, where can folks reach out to you to tell you how awesome you are?
Oh, well, that's nice. You could also call me out, Twitter and Instagram. Actually, more Instagram at One Drop of Love, and it's ONE, not the number one. Our website, onedropoflove.com or .org, and that's where you can find our appearances link and see where we're going to be traveling. I'm doing shows still across the country this year. And we have a newsletter sign up there. We also have a For Educators link that is really for everybody. If you want to know some of the resources I used and kind of learning about race and racism and racial justice, those are there. And then my personal Twitter feed is at Fanshen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. And did you give the website? Did I miss that?
OneDropOfLove.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
So y'all know I got show notes for you. TomRiddle.com/OneDrop. TomRiddle.com/OneDrop is where you'll find all of the links if you were on the go and couldn't get that. But let Fanshen know how awesome she is, how much you appreciate her. Support her work. This was a super awesome privilege to have Fanshen here, so I really appreciate the heck out of it.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I appreciate that I got invited.
My pleasure, honestly.
Thank you.
So our closing ritual is for you to leave with an invitation for the audience.
Oh.
So what would you like to invite them to think about, to consider, to do, to be? What's your invitation?
Oh, it's a to-do.
Okay.
Tell your story. Tell your story.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as always, we are wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at TomEarl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.